Hi, everyone. Today here I have Hollis with me to discuss his real estate journey, what he's doing right now, and what he hopes to do in the future. So, Hollis, welcome. Thanks for coming on and doing this.
No, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and we always enjoy talking to each other. So um, glad to be here.
Yeah, dude. Of course, anytime. So let's kind of get into it, right? Let's tell us about like who you are, who's Hollis, where do you come from, what do you currently do? What's your background?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Hollis from Hollis, actually from Hollis, Queens. I don't live there anymore, but that's where I grew up. Grew up on Hollis Avenue. Just the nickname everybody just calls me by my last name. But I got into real estate probably 4 or 5 years ago now. Growing up, didn't grow up in a great neighborhood, but we always had a landlord, and I just have a very distinct memory of him coming around every month, and his wallet would be enormous. I mean, he had I paid their rent in cash back then. You know what I mean? So he would just have stacks, stacks and stacks of money, man. And I was like, man, whatever Mr. Carter is doing, he's figured it out. you know what I mean? So ever since then, I always knew real estate would really be a, a great way to invest, a great way to earn money. But being from where I was from, it just seemed like the barrier of entry was so high. Like it would just be impossible to get into. And obviously, like, there's no real financial education, right? As far as how to go about getting into properties and getting into real estate if you don't already have a ton of capital, already. So time is going by. I'm getting older. I'm actually became a software engineer. So that's still what I do. My W-2, I'm a software engineer. And I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, I just have to figure out a way to get into real estate, buy some real estate. And then one day a buddy of mine, he's like, hey, have you ever heard of wholesaling? And I was like, no, I don't know what do you mean wholesaling, like goods? So he takes me to this meetup, man, and the idea just blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for, way to get into real estate, and I don't need a ton of capital. So he and I started a company, HSM Property Investments. We're still partners to this day. And we started doing wholesale deals. We live in Connecticut. It's an interesting real estate market up here as far as wholesaling goes. And we did that for a bit, and then we both kind of got older and started families and bought houses and things like that. So our business kind of slowed down as we diverted our attention a little bit to family life and everything like that. But I probably hear my son screaming in the background. But I have a 6-month-old, and he really kind of reinvigorated me. Having a son really reinvigorated me. Just thinking about he's really a huge part of my why. Not to go into too much detail, but growing up, my mom actually stopped working so that she could be home with the kids, and that definitely had a serious effect on us, on our family financially. I mean, it's 5 people trying to live on one person's salary in New York. It was definitely a tough spot, but it was worth the sacrifice for sure. I mean, the neighborhood would have definitely swallowed us up as kids if my mom, we didn't know my mom was going to be home all the time. So obviously I don't live in that same place anymore, but I really want that for my son. Just somebody to be there every day, be able to participate in the activities, school and everything like that. So with that, cash flow came to my mind. You know what I mean? Wholesaling is great, but it's not really cash flow. It doesn't build anything long term. So then we started looking into commercial multifamily assets. But then that big old question came back around: how do you get the money? Right? It was hard to buy one house. How do you get the money to buy, 20 units, 30 units, 50 units? And so we got into raising capital. And that kind of brings us full circle to where we are today. As HSM Property Investments, my partner Spencer and I are raising capital for deals, for our own deals that we're trying to acquire, and also partnering with other people to raise capital for their deals as well. So that's kind of full circle how we how we landed here.
Love it. That's amazing, man. That's you know, you have quite the story, and it's unique, right? And it's so different from, I think, you know, so many people. So, you know, if you touch on a few things there, I just want to highlight, like, for people that don't know who are listening, you know, like, can you just give a quick and dirty explanation of what is wholesaling? Like, how did it allow you to get into real estate? You know, you were saying before it seemed like a huge barrier of entry, right? Like, how did wholesaling allow you to kind of get into the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So, usually you think if you wanted to say flip a house, right? Because that's probably the way to get the most transactional earnings out of real estate, rather, is by flipping a house. You buy it low, sell it, fix it up, sell it high. Well, that takes money, right? You got to have money for down payment, money for repairs, et cetera, depending on how you leverage the property. Well, wholesaling just says, hey, I'm going to have a contract, and instead of actually flipping the house, I'm going to sell my equitable interests in this contract. I'm going to sell this contract to someone for a little bit more than I bought it for. You can call it an assignment fee, you can call it a transaction, whatever, however you want to label it. You're
Right.
just selling that piece of paper, your equitable interest in a property, for a little bit more than you have it under contract for. And the beautiful thing is, you never actually need to purchase the property. So that removes that high barrier to entry. And I mean, depending on the market, you'll see some people, doing wholesale deals for $20,000 spreads. That wasn't our experience.
Yeah.
That wasn't our experience. It was more, $5, $6, $7,000 spreads. But it depends on your market, and maybe we weren't just weren't that good at it, perhaps. But
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, you know, like, what you could make a good, you could create a whole business on just wholesaling, right? Like,
yeah,
there's people who
absolutely.
literally just wholesale, and they do quite well, right? Like, it's like you said, it's active. It's very much not, you know, passive in nature, passive income. It's not wealth building, but it's a good way to get into the game, right? It's a good way to kind of have some chunks of capital created to then reinvest, right? So I've seen a lot of people go that path as well. Um,
100%. And you learn a lot too. I mean, that was probably the best thing about it, was just it gets you around real estate. You start talking to the buyers, because those are the people who are buying that contract for you, right? Like actual real estate investors, people who have probably been doing this for a while. They really know how the game works. And as you start to talk to them, you learn a lot. You start talking to lawyers a lot, or title companies, depending on what market you're in. And you get a ton of free education through experience there, that you can then leverage later on, so that when you're ready to acquire your own properties, you know what to look for, what questions to ask. You have a good idea on repair. So, I mean, it's a really great way to get in.
100%. Yeah. And wholesalers tend to be, you know, great deal finders, great connectors, right? Because they're talking to so many people, like you said, you know, buyers, sellers, closing agents, and, you know, so many different facets of real estate. So that's awesome. That's awesome. So what did your first deal look like? You know, like, how did that look like to you? Or do you remember it, or, you know,
I do.
okay.
Yeah, I do remember my first deal. It was an interesting one, because so we started out cold calling.
Okay.
Literally just picking up the phone. We had pulled a list of numbers from the software called PropStream, which is basically a property data software that can give you information on who might want to sell their property. And so we, pulling data from there, cold calling people. People are like cursing us out. It was very disheartening at first. But the first deal we actually closed came from scrolling through a Facebook group, um, one of the wholesaling in Connecticut Facebook groups. And this woman posts, she says, hey, I'm looking to sell my property. I need to move because of my job. I know there are a lot of investors in this group. Someone please reach out to me. I want, basically, I want to sell my property, something like that. So to me, I'm like, wow, this is unheard of. I didn't even have to pay for this lead. So, she lived about an hour and a half from where I was. I called her up immediately. I went to see the house a couple of days later. Um, and she had an interesting situation, because she didn't actually have enough equity to sell her property, which is why she was posting it in the Facebook group, as opposed, well, that and the speed she needed to move at, which is why she was posting it there, instead of going the traditional path with a realtor and everything like that. So she didn't have enough equity, and I had just heard about taking down properties or wholesaling properties subject to the existing mortgage. So I know that's probably a little bit more of an advanced strategy, maybe some might call it, but for anyone who doesn't understand what that is, essentially, when there's a mortgage on the house, the mortgage and the property are not necessarily tied together, or the mortgage and the title holder of the property are not necessarily tied together. So in that case, she wanted to um, sign the title over to us, but keep the existing mortgage in place, and we would then just pay on that mortgage. So we purchased the property subject to the terms and conditions of that existing mortgage. I had never done a deal like that before, but I knew it was the only way to do this deal because she had very, very little equity. So, I mean, I got it under contract. We did a negotiation. I paid a little bit, probably $7,000 or $8,000 too much for the house, but I knew that. But I wanted that first deal so bad. And so, we took that one down. I wanted to keep the deal, but it would not have been responsible, honestly, because when you do a property subject to, that mortgage is still in that original person's name. And if anything were to happen and you don't have the funds to cover that mortgage, you're now affecting their credit and their, potential ability to acquire a mortgage in the future. So that's why they call it an advanced strategy, because if you don't have the funds to cover that person's mortgage, at least for a few months, you probably shouldn't purchase deals that way. So I ended up wholesaling this deal to another guy. There's a guy in Connecticut who's pretty much the subject to go-to guy. And he's in all the Facebook groups. He's like, hey, he pretty much only buys property subject to or owner finance. So I called him up and I was like, hey man, I got a deal. He looked at the numbers and he was like, hey, Hollis, you're probably paying $5,000 or $6,000 too much for this house. But I was like, yeah, man, I know, but I'm just trying to get the deal done. He was like, okay, cool. He went to go see it. And he's like, yep, I'll take it. And so that was our first deal we did. The toughest part about that deal, I didn't realize that most attorneys don't want to handle subject to transactions. And Connecticut is an attorney state, not a title state. So you need a closing attorney for every transaction. And I almost lost the deal because I told her we would close by a certain date. We had everything set up. In my mind, I actually had an attorney who we had began talking to. We were going to use him for our deals coming up. And I called him up about a deal. He was like, oh, I don't do those. Sorry. So I literally spent from a Friday to a Sunday calling every attorney I just Googled Connecticut real estate attorneys, and I was calling every single name on the list until I finally found one that would actually do it. So we ended up closing on time, and that was the very first deal we ever did.
Wow, amazing. Talk about your first one being a doozy, right? Like that's you went straight to advanced, right? Like, I mean, yeah, you went from like not doing a deal to straight up doing subject to transactions. And for anyone that watches this later who's confused about subject to and never heard of it, talk to Hollis. He's been through it. Talk to me. I know how to structure subject to deals. I'm part of a mentorship that that's kind of what we specialize in, is creative financing. So there's many ways to do real estate, right? Like that's kind of what we're getting to here. It's not just buying the traditional way of on the market or with the realtor. That's one way, but there's also you could wholesale real estate. You can buy it creatively with subject to, seller finance, novations. There's multiple ways to get into real estate, right? So so the point is, don't let that stop you, right? Like find a way to get it done, and that's what you did, man. That's amazing, and congratulations on that. I'm sure that was quite the learning experience.
Oh, big time. But what I will say, the cool thing about that was, with wholesaling especially, you start to do better when you find situations where you can provide a solution to a problem. This woman, her job was moving her. She had a very limited amount of time. There was a specific apartment she wanted to get to put her daughter in a specific school district, but she had a specific amount of time to sign that lease. She needed the money from the sale of the house to sign it. So there was a specific problem that she had. And, we were able to provide a solution. She was a single mom. She didn't have anybody who could help her move. We ended up actually paying a moving company as part of the deal to go in, pack her stuff, and move her out of there. And she was just really appreciative at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Just that we were able to help her. So a huge lesson was find a problem and become the solution. And business gets a lot easier. It was a bit of a stressful deal. First one, subject to, I had to do a lot of learning on the fly. A lot of lawyers hung up on me. But becoming that solution was huge.
Yeah, 100%. And I had a mentor who told me once that in business, those who succeed is highly correlated to the degree of the problems in which they solve, right?
Mm,
And whether they're doesn't have to be as the most amount of problems, but some people solve bigger problems, right? And I've seen people wholesale deals and make 100K on those deals. Like I've literally seen a six-figure assignment fee, right? And that's
wow.
yeah, and it's amazing, right? But I'm sure they solved a big enough problem, or they were there at the right place, to solve said problem, right? And they found a solution that maybe others couldn't have. Maybe a realtor couldn't list it because they were in not enough equity, or like there maybe it was there's so many different things, right? And so
Yeah.
it's uncovering that motivation and solving problems, like you said. So
Yep. Yep.
that's huge. That's huge. So tell me today now, like, right, you're solving those problems now. What are you doing today, right? Like, what's your current outlook? What kind of problems are you trying to solve today?
Yeah. The problem we're solving today is, so it kind of goes back to, maybe call it a secondary why, for me, um, is giving people access to getting into real estate, giving them access to the equity, to the cash flow, and providing some level of education. So, um, in our capital raising, which is kind of one of the main focuses of our business now, we're trying to get regular W-2 employees like myself involved in real estate transactions. Everyone knows real estate has created the most millionaires out of any other income stream. Um, every wealthy person, every wealth institution is involved in real estate, and people, we can let that kind of create a mental block for us, right? Like, oh, that's what the wealthy people do. I need to be wealthy to get involved. That was my own mindset. I could have started a long, long time ago. I could have invested in assets, not even just wholesaling, honestly. I could have invested in assets had the opportunity been available, or better said, had I known where to find the opportunity. So in our capital raising, we try to find the best ways to make the investment available to as many people as possible. We don't just target accredited investors, although we do we do like accredited investors as we raise capital, but we really try to bring the opportunities to everyday folks.
Yeah, and I mean that's amazing, right? Because so many people are busy and have W-2 jobs, and are like don't have time for everything, right? They have families and they have obligations and things. So no, that's awesome. That's amazing what you guys are doing. So I hear that you guys are now, I guess, have a fund, and you talked a little bit about accredited investors, right? Can you touch upon what you guys are doing in your fund, and what it is between accredited, non-accredited? How does it all work?
Yeah, for sure. So accredited investors. Oh, let me dial it back. Whenever you want to invest in a large real estate deals, um, the way that they're presented differs depending on who is it's being presented to. For example, some opportunities are only available to individuals of a certain net worth, and other opportunities are available to anyone who has an established relationship uh, with the person making the offering. You know what I mean? So um, in our example, our fund is set up so that people who we have a relationship with are able to invest, and accredited investors are able to invest as well. It's pretty interesting. It's really exciting for us. A big thing that we're super excited about getting going. It's targeting a very hot industry right now, which is Airbnbs, which are booming right now. It's really cool, short-term rentals. So that's something that we've gotten into, and it's really exciting. It's a major step for us forward, and it's going to be huge for us going forward. The relationships that we're going to form, and also we're investing in the deal ourselves. So we're pretty excited about it.
Love it. Okay, cool. So Airbnbs, right? Like everyone knows, like they're the hot thing right now, like you said, right? So Airbnbs are everywhere now. They're popping up. So what's you guys' kind of focus? What do you guys like to do in terms of Airbnbs? Like if somebody wants to get involved, should they, like, do they have to know how to manage Airbnbs, or are they going to have to get those midnight calls? Is that how it works?
Oh no, I can't get into the property, right? The code is not working.
Yeah.
No. So that's the beautiful thing about it. It'd be the investors take a totally passive role the way that everything is set up. We actually have professional superhost management teams, professional designers for the Airbnbs. We are targeting unique markets. Everyone, when you think of a vacation home, people kind of think about the seasonality of it, right? Like if you have a beach house, you probably don't want to go there in the winter. And if you own that as an Airbnb, that's several months where you probably are making less or maybe no money, depending on what beach you're on. So we're really set up in a very intuitive way where we target markets with low seasonality, meaning markets where people want to go there all year round. You think about a place that's picturesque in the fall, perhaps with the leaves changing. In the winter, people want to go there. Maybe they're skiing or hiking or whatever the case may be. And in the summer, it's great to do hiking, outdoor activities. Markets like that, markets like the Poconos, Scottsdale, Arizona, we're in places like that. And for the investor, they're not fielding any of the calls. We have a totally professional team for that. Very, very successful team we put in place. Some major tech players are actually involved in the fund, leading some of those different management teams and groups. So it's really easy for the investors. All the work, we're doing some work on the back end, but we make it really easy for the investors.
Awesome. I love that. That's passive is the key, right? Passive is the name of the game. So you guys are letting people do that, right? You guys are providing that opportunity. So it's amazing. And I wish you guys the best of luck. I'm excited for you guys because when you first started, right? Like, in real estate, did you think you would be at this place where you are now? Did you think that you'd be able to be doing this?
Man, not at all. I tell you, there were so many really limiting beliefs just that I didn't even realize I had, kind of pigeonholing myself, but I've broken down a lot of those barriers and definitely didn't think I'd be, in this place having that type of opportunities that we've gotten exposure to at this point.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head right there, right? Limiting beliefs, we all have them to some degree, right? Like what we think is possible, what we're limited to in our life, and what we have based at our kind of disposal currently, right? But overcoming that is huge, right? And it's out of your comfort zone. You have to kind of think outside the box and really be open to it, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's not comfortable to our normal state of being, right? Like we think we tend to lean towards comfort and not go towards discomfort, right? So for somebody who's like just kind of exploring the past, isn't sure, maybe you a few years ago, right? What's something you would tell them to kind of get them going, right? Like what's something, if you can go back and tell yourself, right, when you first started, like, hey, from what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
Probably my dad used to have this saying, and it's become kind of a mantra for me in a way. He always used to say, reach for the stars and grab the moon. So the idea behind that being, obviously, if you're reaching for the stars, you've kind of set yourself up for a bit of a ambitious goal, we'll call it, right? Trying to grab all the stars. But worst case scenario, if you're reaching into the stars and you grab them, you managed to grab the moon. You didn't get the stars, but you managed to grab the moon. You did pretty good. You know what I mean? And that's a major thing, just to say, don't limit yourself in what you think you can achieve. It's okay to set ambitious goals for yourself. It's okay to set, lofty, difficult to achieve goals for yourself, because really the worst case scenario is you fail, but even in failure, you've likely achieved much more than you would have had you not attempted at all, or had you set the bar even lower, right? So, don't be afraid to reach way, 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 way outside the bounds of what you think you can achieve, because in the end, even if you fail, what you do achieve will be incredible.
100%. Beautifully said there. And just to add on to it, just one thing is, when it seems daunting in the beginning, you're like, man, how am I going to do this? I've never done it before. What really helps is to connect with somebody who is doing it and who has done it, right? Like finding a person, finding a mentor, or finding, somebody in your network who's like, hey man, like I see, Hollis has done something like this, right? He's doing it. Let me reach out and see what he's doing and how he did it, right? And so I found personally that to be one of the best things to help kind of, I don't know, make things seem more possible, right? Or give you some kind of a outline in how to achieve something, um, just to replicate what somebody else is doing, right? Or has done.
100%, man, 100%. And to your point, that reaching out and networking, man, I cannot tell you. So going back to when we first got into it, started wholesaling. I didn't tell anybody I was wholesaling. I didn't really know anybody else who was wholesaling. Like, I met some people at this event, but I didn't really keep in touch with many of those people, really none of them. Um, when I started really picking up traction in real estate, and even now talking about multifamily real estate and capital raising, being able to get deal flow with brokers and build these relationships, man, networking, I don't want to call it the most important activity, but it is very, very high on the list because, to your point, the things that you learn from people, you'll find people in real estate, you would think that because it's so competitive, people would be like really stingy with their information and they wouldn't want to, teach you anything. That is not the case. Almost, I've never encountered an investor who, was withholding information from me when I asked them a question. People are very forthcoming with it, and that gives you confidence in a way. Seeing that, oh wow, this other guy is doing it, and when he explained to me what he was doing, it's far less complicated or far less daunting than I thought it would be. And then, not to drag on, but on the other hand of that, people kind of let that competition scare them away sometimes, like they think, oh, wow, I want to do it, but there are so many people doing it. And now they feel like they don't, now they're discouraged and don't want to participate anymore. But you definitely can't let that stop you. Think about how many restaurants open up next to other restaurants.
Exactly, right.
Plenty of food to go around. There's plenty of
Yeah,
customers to go around.
exactly. It's to get to that abundance mentality, right? And I can tell you, I wasn't always that way, right? Like it's
Yeah.
takes work, it takes processing. Like, it's a mindset shift, but it's something that I work on constantly. It's not just like all of a sudden you're this way, right? Like
No,
it's
no.
something that, especially because, like, if you come from a world where, scarcity mindset, then it's hard to kind of break that. It takes time, right?
100%.
So yeah, this isn't to show that like we are this way now, right? We're working on it ourselves, right?
Man,
Like all
yeah.
the time.
So, funny story, real quick. So I had a property. It's a property I put in an offer on. I thought it was a fairly competitive offer. I'm talking to a guy from my local RIA here in Connecticut, from the CT RIA, one of the owners, and he turns around and tells me, he's like, "Yeah, I made an offer on that property too." Now, my scarcity mindset immediately went, "Oh no, I thought I was like, I thought I had the exclusive." You know what I mean? And he has much more access than I do. He's been doing this much longer. He has much more capital. Surely his offer was higher than mine. Or if it wasn't, mine was probably too high then, because he's much better at this than I am, for sure. Um, and so my initial reaction was to retreat. You know what I mean? That scarcity mindset, like, oh wow, someone else is in this space. Let me just dial it back. But then the flip side of that is, look who's in this space, right? The fact that you're in the NBA and LeBron James is in the NBA is scary, because LeBron is probably going to beat you.
Yeah.
But you're playing in the same level with LeBron James. Like, think about what you've achieved in this moment. You know what I mean? And so while it did scare me, it also gave me some encouragement. Like, wow, I must be looking at the right types of properties.
You're doing
You know
something
what I
right.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that's confidence, right? That's knowing now that you're playing in the right space, you're looking and doing the right things, right? So 100% agree, and that's something that, yeah, it's a different way of thinking, right? And it's counterintuitive, but it's
Yeah,
so
for
true,
sure. And
right?
uncomfortable.
And
Uncomfortable.
uncomfortable, 100%.
Yeah.
So then, like, in that regard, right? Like, for reaching for the stars and grabbing the moon, right? So what's the goals for 2022? What are you trying to accomplish this year?
Okay, so it's so funny. We set a goal um, to raise $5 million this year. We set that goal at the end of Q1, so really we didn't give ourselves a full year. We gave ourselves, 3 quarters, 9 months to do it. And just by having that goal and pushing ourselves and putting ourselves out there is how we were able to, get this partnership with TechVestors for this Airbnb fund, which is a $1.25 billion raise, I believe, we're doing with them. So that's going to be a nice chunk of our goal already. So that's a good moon grab, if you want to, if you want to call it that.
Love
it. So, and beyond that, we've talked about it a little bit. I'm really interested in the mobile home park space, and I have a goal of acquiring a park this year. I've put in a few LOIs on some parks already, and we'll see what happens with those. And yeah, those are some of our goals, and we'll see what happens with some more funds, perhaps, before the year is out.
Awesome. Okay, so mobile home parks and some private capital, right? So besides that, like what else are you looking for in your business? Like if somebody wants to come and help, what's something that you'd be looking for personally right now?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're really looking to connect with, like I said, private or private money investors, people who want to get into real estate. Really, that networking aspect is really huge for us. As a capital raising business, really, the more people we talk to, that's really our lifeblood. You know what I mean? And beyond that, we're always looking for deals, man.
Deals and capital, right?
Always looking for deals, and we're always looking for capital. But a huge thing, and I'll talk to you a little bit about this, we want partnerships, long-term relationships with, like-minded people with that growth mindset, because a huge thing we want to do is bring value to people, bring value to communities. You think about the mobile home park space, that's typically low income housing, but it doesn't need to be the lowest class community in the neighborhood, right? So that's something that we're focused on, having, like I said, people with that like mindset that, obviously we're in this to make a profit. That's why people work. But we can also bring value to people outside of the business or the individuals, who are living in the houses, the residents, the people in the community as well. So we're looking to form some partnerships and relationships, man, with people who are thinking like that, and people who are go-getters like yourself.
Love it, man. Love it. No, you guys are doing some big things, and I think you guys are really going to make a difference. So I'm excited for you guys. If somebody wants to reach out to you, Hollis, how can they reach you? What's the best way that you prefer?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on Facebook, Will Hollis. Hollis is Hollis. I'm sure it'll probably be somewhere on the
I'll link it. Yep. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, on the podcast. You can reach me by email, Hollis at hsmpropertyinvestments.com. We'll put that maybe in the podcast description as well. And yeah, man, we'll drop my calendar link. I meet with people all the time. Pretty much all I do is talk to people. So
Love it.
Yeah, I'm happy to sit down and chat with anybody.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again, man, for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it. For all those that want to connect, I'll put the information below. So thank you, and wish you all the best.
Man, I appreciate you having me, dude. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
All right, man.